Now here's the thing. That tells us by our powers of deduction, Brent, do you know what a DHCP pool is?
Well, since you're obviously playing this out, I'm going to say no.
Okay, so
because you have an answer, don't you?
within networking, again, we did cover this in another episode, but I'm just going to kind of glance over it just a little bit. I'm going to go back and find that episode and put it in the description below. But in that episode, we talked specifically about DHCP pool. So a DHCP pool is essentially a pool of IP addresses that the router is going to hand out to different devices.
Semi-reserved, not a fully reserved, but this is the area we want to stick stuff.
So this is the area that we want to stick stuff. So when a device gets connected to the network, so let's say your cell phone or a laptop gets connected to the Wi-Fi, it's going to ask the router or the DHCP server, which in most cases is the router, I need an IP address, is essentially what it's doing. And the router is going to respond, okay, great, use this address. And both are going to log that information, and now it's broadcasting on the network at that address. So your laptop may say, okay, or the router says, okay, Mr. Laptop, you are at 117, right? Now your phone is at 125, or something like that. So the router is handing out different addresses from the DHCP pool. Now, Brent, where do we not want to put our cameras? Or back up, where do we not want to put any static device?
We want to try to avoid the DHCP pool, because we want to be in an area where they're not going to actually drop something on top of us.
Right. So
nobody wants a piano on the head.
let's say, for instance, we're going to take this address here. So this is 192.168.0.136. So 192.168.0.136, right? Now, if we put our camera at .136, right, then now something happens. The power goes out, something's unplugged or whatever else. Everything gets plugged back in and turned on. Now, my Xbox is normally down here at 250, right?
Normally.
Well, it's not even normally. It's just, let's just say that's where mine normally sits because that's where my router put it. Now, when the power goes out and comes back on, it may be time for this Xbox to get a new IP address anyway. There's actually leases is what it's called. So what's going to happen then is that as the router is then handing out new addresses, let's say that our IP camera, which is at this 136 address, takes just a little bit longer time for it to reboot, right? So that means that there's a chance that during that reboot time that the Xbox could be given that address after the reboot. Which means now, when it comes back online, the Xbox is now at 136. But the IP camera that I have, I've actually put in there, hey, IP camera, this is your static IP address, it's 136. So now, after the Xbox has already been given this address after the reboot, now the IP camera comes online and says, I'm at 192.168.0.136.
And the router does not reassign the Xbox.
No, it does not, because it's not that smart. Now, there are some systems out there, but we're talking thousands upon thousands of dollars smart.
Now, you and I have dealt with this problem.
Yes, we have. Yeah, there you go. So actually, Randall's saying the same thing there on YouTube. He's saying, and the DHCP server leases this IP address to a device for a fixed period of time. As long as it's active, it can keep it. That's true. And that's where the problem comes in. So if the Xbox is leased at 250, but then it goes offline or whatever else, then whenever power comes back online, the Xbox turns on automatically for some reason, whatever it is, now all of a sudden it could be sitting at an IP address that our IP camera was actually using to begin with. So now we've got a pretty big problem because the IP camera is now saying, no, I am Spartacus. So with this here, now the Xbox is sitting at 136 and the camera is saying, no, I'm at 136. So now the problem is that the router doesn't care. At this point, it's the router saying, I don't care. I've already given out that IP address to this device, so it's going to sit there at 136. It's not going to try to renegotiate for it. That causes a big problem because now the Xbox is stepping on the IP camera, which now that means that when the NVR comes back online and is looking for that IP camera, nothing's there, or it'll be intermittent. You may have a flash of a picture and then the picture goes away because the Xbox may be talking part of the time, and then when it's not talking, now the camera is talking. And so then you have just basically an overall issue.
Pretty much anybody that does control systems has run into this issue.
100%.